Parents gave my brother a house and business loan, but left me empty-handed. All right, here we go. So, I'm Alex, 32, married to my wife, Grace, who's 31. We've been together for 6 years, working hard to build a decent life for ourselves. We've got a modest apartment, both of us holding down jobs, paying bills, and all that good stuff. Nothing flashy, but we're comfortable, and that's all I ever really wanted. Well, all I ever wanted, until I realized just how messed up my family dynamic was. Here's the thing. I'm the older child, and then there's my younger brother Liam, who's 29. Growing up, we had the usual sibling rivalry stuff. He was the annoying little brother. I was the one who had to play the responsible older kid role. But even then, I could tell something was different in the way our parents treated us. It wasn't in-your-face favoritism, but it was there, quietly, like an unspoken rule in the house. At first I didn't mind. I figured, hey, every family's got their quirks, right? So I did what I was supposed to do. Went to school, got decent grades, graduated, went to college, and worked part-time jobs to pay my way through. I didn't expect my parents to cover my college expenses or anything. I mean, it would have been nice, but I wasn't holding my breath. My parents were never rolling in money, but we got by, and I'd always been independent. I've been used to handling things on my own, so working and studying was just normal to me. Now Liam? He took a different path. College wasn't his thing, and he wasn't shy about saying so. I don't judge him for that. College isn't for everyone, right? But he kind of drifted through his early 20s without much of a plan. While I was stressing over assignments, balancing work, and trying to keep my head above water financially, Liam was, well, let's just say he was figuring things out. No part-time jobs, no real structure, just him and his dreams. Around 24, Liam decides he wants to open a restaurant. No experience, no real plan, just this idea that he'd be his own boss and make it big in the food industry. The surprising part? My parents, who've always been super careful with money, suddenly decided to back him. Not just a little either. They somehow managed to pull together $50,000 to help him launch this restaurant. Now, here's where it gets wild. Not only did they give him 50 grand for the restaurant, but they also handed him the down payment for a house that same year. I didn't even know they were capable of putting that kind of money together. It wasn't some mansion or anything, but it was a decent little place. Meanwhile, I'm still paying off student loans, working my ass off, and renting a small apartment. I didn't even find out about this right away. They didn't make a big announcement like, oh hey Alex, by the way, we're giving your brother a boatload of cash. Nope. I found out when Liam casually mentioned it during a family dinner. He was talking about the renovations he was planning for his new place, how excited he was to be his own boss, and how great it was that mom and dad believed in him. I just sat there, trying to process it all. After dinner, I pulled my parents aside and asked about it. I'll never forget the way they looked at each other, like they'd been caught doing something they knew they shouldn't have done but weren't sorry for. My mom shrugged and said, well, Liam needs a little extra help. You've always been the independent one, Alex. We knew you'd be fine on your own. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They just handed over tens of thousands of dollars to Liam, no questions asked. But when I was scraping by in college, working 2 jobs, they didn't offer a single dime. It wasn't just about the money, though that stung too. It was the realization that, in their eyes, I didn't need help because I was fine. Apparently, my success or struggle didn't even register as something worth supporting. So, I asked them flat out, did it ever cross your minds to offer me any help when I was in school, working nonstop just to make it by? My dad gave this dismissive look and said, you've always been driven, Alex. You didn't need our help. Liam just doesn't have that same drive. And that was it. End of conversation. I was floored. I felt like they just shrugged off years of my hard work, of me trying to be the responsible one they always expected me to be. Suddenly, it all felt so pointless. They were always going to see Liam as the one who needed help, the one who needed a little boost, while I'd always be the one expected to make it on my own. After that, I started pulling back. I didn't visit as much, stopped calling them as often. Every time I did see them, it was like this reminder that I was somehow less in their eyes. Not less successful, just less deserving of their attention and support. They didn't seem to notice my absence at first. They'd still call to update me on Liam's restaurant, ask if I'd seen his new place, talk about how proud they were of him. It was always about Liam. When Grace and I got engaged, we kept it small. We posted some photos on social media, and that's how my parents found out. I know that might seem harsh, but honestly, they hadn't been much of a part of my life for years. Why would I suddenly bring them into this major moment? They texted me after they saw the photos saying they were disappointed that I hadn't told them personally, that they felt excluded, but they didn't even bother to congratulate me. The irony hit hard. They were upset I hadn't told them about my wedding, Yet I was expected to be happy for Liam getting a business and a house on their dime. I finally decided it was time to speak up. I sent them a text, laying it all out, how their treatment over the years had made me feel like an afterthought. I told them it wasn't about the money, it was about how they'd chosen to support him in every way possible while leaving me to fend for myself. I don't know what I was expecting, but it definitely wasn't the response I got. My mom called me ungrateful, saying I was holding a grudge over nothing, while my dad told me to grow up and stop making everything about me. Apparently, to them, my whole life has just been some minor detail, not worth their support or interest. So here I am, questioning everything. Is it so unreasonable to want a little acknowledgement, a little support for once? I've tried to make peace with it, but it's hard to just let it go when every conversation with them just reminds me of how little I apparently matter. All right, so after I'd finally told my parents how I felt about the whole favoring Liam situation, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd get it. I figured they'd at least take a step back, maybe try to see things from my point of view. I wasn't looking for an apology or anything dramatic, just a little bit of acknowledgement, but that's not what happened. A few days later, my mom called me. I thought maybe it was her way of reaching out to make things right, so I picked up. But right from the start, I could tell that wasn't why she was calling. The conversation kicked off with her saying, "I'm disappointed in you, Alex." That was her opener. No, "How are you?" No, "Let's talk." Just straight up disappointment. She didn't waste any time letting me know that she thought I was being selfish and childish for even bringing up my issues with how they'd treated me compared to Liam. She was saying things like, "Family is supposed to be supportive of each other, Alex. You're acting like you're above that." I tried to stay calm, really tried, but hearing her throw those words around was infuriating. I told her again that it wasn't just about the money they gave Liam. It was about how they'd been willing to support him in every way imaginable, while I'd been left to figure everything out on my own. It was like they never even saw me struggling through college, balancing work and all of that. Meanwhile, they'd handed Liam a business and a house without him lifting a finger, but she wasn't hearing it. She kept saying that I was holding a grudge over something that wasn't that big of a deal. According to her, I should just be happy that Liam was doing well and that our family was successful because of him. She even said, "You've always been so driven, Alex. You didn't need our help, but Liam, he needed that support to get going." That's when I lost it a little. I asked her straight up, "Why did you never think I needed help too? Why is it so hard for you to just admit that you've always favored Liam even when I was struggling?" I could hear her getting frustrated, like she was tired of explaining the same thing over and over. And that's when she hit me with the line that really got under my skin. "You're just jealous of your brother," she said. "I don't know why you're so bitter about his success. You should be proud of him." Jealous? I was stunned. I'd opened up about how left out and unsupported I felt, and her takeaway was that I was jealous of my little brother. I told her, "Mom, this isn't about jealousy. It's about feeling like I'm nothing more than an afterthought to you guys. I'm not angry that Liam is successful. I'm angry that you think he's worth supporting and I'm not." She didn't like that. Her tone got sharper, and she said something along the lines of, "Well, we did the best we could for both of you, and if you're too blind to see that, then I don't know what else to say." That's when I realized there was no point in trying to get through to her. My parents had already made up their minds about who I was in their story. I was the independent one, the capable one, the one who didn't need anything from them. And they were sticking to that version of events, no matter what I said. So I ended the call, but it didn't stop there. Later that night, my dad decided to chime in with his own 2 cents via text. He sent me this long message about how I was overreacting and that it was ridiculous to let something as small as a financial favor to Liam ruin the family bond. He went on about how family is more important than petty grievances and how I needed to mature and let it go. He even said that I was self-centered for making them feel bad about helping their son succeed. That text really got to me. All those years of working hard, of sacrificing and hustling to make a life for myself, and they had the nerve to call me self-centered? They were mad because I dared to ask for a little recognition of the unfair treatment. Grace found me reading the text, and when I explained what happened, she just shook her head. She told me that I had every right to feel hurt, and that my parents were completely out of line. She reminded me that I'd put up with this kind of favoritism for way too long, and that if I kept letting it slide, they'd just continue treating me this way. Honestly, Grace has always been the voice of reason in my life. She pointed out that my parents probably weren't going to change overnight, if ever. They were so locked into this idea that I was the one who didn't need help, that they couldn't see how hurtful their actions had been. and they definitely didn't like being called out on it. After sleeping on it, I decided to put some boundaries in place. I wasn't going to keep letting them guilt trip me every time I spoke up for myself. I sent a text back to my dad, short and to the point. I basically said, I'm not overreacting and I'm not going to apologize for sharing how I feel. I'm hurt, and if you can't understand that, then maybe we need to take a step back for a while. The silence that followed was pretty telling. No calls, no texts, nothing. They didn't reach out after that, not even to check in or make peace. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved, like I'd finally taken a stand for myself instead of just keeping quiet and letting them walk all over me. It's strange, though. Even after all of that, there was a small part of me that hoped they'd come around. I wanted them to at least try to understand. But as days turned into weeks with no word from them, I started to realize that they were probably never going to see things from my side. I mean, if they hadn't gotten it by now, they probably never would. That's where things are right now. Grace has been incredible through all of this, reminding me that family doesn't get a free pass to treat you however they want just because you share the same blood. I've started to accept that my parents and I may never see eye to eye, and honestly, I'm coming to terms with it. It's just tough because, as much as I want to let go, there's still that nagging feeling of betrayal that's hard to shake off. For now, I'm taking a break from them. I need time to figure things out and to decide if I even want a relationship with people who can't see the hurt they've caused. So after weeks of silence from my parents, just when I thought things were finally settling, my phone buzzes one afternoon. It's Liam. He hasn't reached out to me in ages, so seeing his name pop up was like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to expect, but after a minute of staring at my phone, I decided to pick up. Right away, he dives into it. No small talk, no, how's it going? Just, hey, I wanted to talk to you about all this stuff with mom and dad. I knew where this was headed, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to hear him out. Maybe, just maybe, he'd have some perspective that could help me understand. But no. Within minutes, it was clear he was just as clueless as my parents. Liam starts going on about how he doesn't understand why I'm making a big deal out of everything. He kept saying, Mom and Dad are just doing what they think is best, and how he felt like I was blowing things way out of proportion. It was honestly mind-boggling to sit there and listen to him, realizing he had no concept of what I'd been going through. I asked him, Liam, do you even get why I'm upset? It's not just about the money or the house. It's about how they've always prioritized you, how they were willing to hand you everything while I had to scrape by on my own. Does that not seem unfair to you? But he just shrugged it off like I was talking about the weather. Well, you always seemed fine, he said, like that explained everything. You've always been the one who has it together. I don't know what you want from them or me. The conversation was going nowhere fast, but I kept pushing. I told him how hurt I was, how for years I'd felt like the backup kid they only paid attention to when it was convenient. I was hoping something might click for him, that he'd at least acknowledge it was messed up. But instead he hit me with, look, they just helped me out a little because I needed it more. It's not like I asked for it. A little help? This guy got a business and a house and he calls that a little help? I almost laughed. It was like talking to someone who had lived a completely different life than me, like he'd grown up with different parents or something. But I guess, in a way, he did. Liam had parents who coddled him, who supported him financially and emotionally whenever he needed it. I had parents who expected me to figure it all out by myself. When I tried to explain this, he got defensive, saying things like, but you turned out fine, didn't you? And they probably thought you didn't need their help. At that point, it became clear that he wasn't going to get it. He honestly believed that because I'd managed to scrape by, it somehow justified everything. It was like he couldn't wrap his head around the idea that just because I turned out fine didn't mean the road to get here wasn't hell. Then he dropped this gem. I didn't ask them to give me money or buy me a house. They offered, so what was I supposed to do? Say no? He said it like I was somehow the unreasonable one for being upset about something he couldn't control. It was honestly exhausting. I told him, Liam, it's not about you asking for it. It's about the fact that they offered it to you without even considering that I might need a little help too. That's what hurts. But he just brushed it off, saying, well, you're the older brother, Alex. You're supposed to have it together. That was the last straw. I couldn't believe he actually thought that way. I mean, maybe my parents had trained him to see things that way, but it didn't make it any less frustrating. At that point, I knew continuing the conversation was pointless. He wasn't going to see things from my perspective, and he was just going to keep defending our parents and his right to accept their help. I told him, you know what, Liam? I don't expect you to understand. You got lucky. You were their priority, and you're right. You don't have to apologize for that. But don't expect me to sit around and pretend like it's fair either. I'm done trying to explain myself to people who don't want to understand." There was a pause, and then he said, "I just don't get why you're so bitter about it." He sounded genuinely confused, like he couldn't comprehend why any of this would bother me. I didn't have the energy to keep explaining, so I just ended the call. There was no point dragging it out any longer. After hanging up, I sat there, feeling a weird mix of relief and frustration. It was clear to me that Liam was never going to get it. To him, the world was exactly as it should be. He'd been handed opportunities and support without having to ask for it, and he couldn't see why anyone else would be upset about that. I think that conversation really sealed it for me. Up until that point, there was a small part of me that hoped maybe someone in my family would understand where I was coming from. But after talking to Liam, I realized that they were all wrapped up in this narrative they'd built about me. The strong, independent son who didn't need anything. They'd decided I was fine on my own, so that was that. Grace came home later and found me sitting on the couch, clearly still fuming. She didn't even have to ask. She just sat down beside me and listened while I vented. I told her every frustrating detail, from how Liam thought I was overreacting to how he genuinely believed I should just be happy that he'd been given so much support. She let me talk it out, and then she said something that really hit home. She told me, "Maybe it's time to let go of the idea that they'll ever understand, Alex. You've done everything you can to make your side clear. And if they're not willing to see it, that's on them, not you." She was right, of course. I'd been holding on to this hope that if I just explained it well enough, if I just laid it out in a way that made sense, my family would finally understand. But the truth was, they didn't want to understand. They were comfortable with their version of events, where I was the strong one and Liam was the one who needed them. Changing that story would mean admitting they'd made mistakes, and I knew now that they weren't willing to do that. That night, I decided I needed some real distance from all of them. Not just a break, but actual space to live my life without their constant judgments and guilt trips hanging over me. It was tough to accept, but I knew it was the only way I was going to find any peace. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was finally taking control of the situation. I was done chasing their approval or hoping they'd magically change. If they wanted to keep living in their little world where I was fine and Liam was the one who needed them, then fine. They could have that world. I just didn't need to be a part of it. So, after that last conversation with Liam, I was ready to step back from the whole family situation. I was exhausted from explaining myself to people who just weren't going to get it. And honestly, I thought I'd made that clear enough in my last text to my parents. But apparently they didn't get the hint. About a week later, I got this massive email from my dad. He starts off by saying that he's disappointed in how I'm handling things and goes on this long-winded rant about how family is everything and that I'm ruining our bond by holding a grudge. It was paragraph after paragraph of this guilt-trippy nonsense about how I'm being immature and how I need to grow up and move on. I couldn't believe it. He didn't even acknowledge anything I'd said in my last message. It was like he was talking at me, not to me. There was no attempt to understand my perspective or even a hint of regret for how things had gone down. It was just a long lecture about how I was overreacting and making life harder for everyone. I stared at that email for a while, debating if it was even worth replying. Part of me wanted to fire back with everything I'd been holding in, but I knew it'd just be more wasted energy. I'd already laid it out for them, told them exactly how hurt I felt, how their actions over the years had made me feel like I didn't matter. They'd ignored all of that and decided to spin it as me being ungrateful or jealous. So I just left it on read and didn't respond. Grace found me later that day, and she could tell something was up. I showed her the email, and she just shook her head, saying, "You don't owe them a response, you know." And she was right. I didn't. But there was this part of me that felt bad. Like somehow, by not answering, I was the one being difficult. It's weird how family guilt sticks with you, even when you know you're in the right. But I held firm. I didn't reply. I told myself that if they wanted a relationship with me, they'd have to acknowledge my feelings and actually try to understand where I was coming from. Until then, I wasn't going to keep bending over backward to make them feel better about their choices. It wasn't fair to me, and I was done compromising my mental health to keep the peace. Of course, my silence didn't go over well. A few days later, I get a call from my mom. I almost didn't pick up, but a small part of me hoped she might actually be reaching out to talk, not to lecture. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. She starts off calm, almost sweet, which threw me off because that's not her usual style when she's upset. But then, after a minute or two, she drops the act and launches into this whole speech about how I'm tearing the family apart and how my stubbornness is causing everyone stress. She kept saying, "We just want things to go back to how they were," as if that was a real solution. I told her, "Going back to how things were is exactly the problem. I don't want to keep pretending everything's fine while you and Dad keep acting like Liam is the only one who matters." I reminded her that I'd spent years dealing with this favoritism, and I was finally standing up for myself. And instead of understanding, they were making me out to be the villain. But she kept going on about how family isn't supposed to be fair, and how sometimes we just need to put our differences aside. She even threw in, "We're getting older, Alex. Do you really want things to be like this for the rest of our lives?" It was pure guilt tripping, and I could see exactly what she was doing, but it didn't make it any less effective. As much as I hated to admit it, her words got to me. I don't want things to be like this forever. But I also don't want to keep putting up with their crap just to make things look okay. So I told her, "If you want things to get better, then actually listen to what I'm saying. Acknowledge that you've hurt me and that the way you've treated Liam and me isn't fair. I'm not asking for miracles here, just a little accountability." But she shut that down fast, saying, "Oh, so we're supposed to apologize for helping your brother? That's ridiculous, Alex. You know we love you both equally." It was like talking to a wall. She didn't get it, and maybe she never would. So I said, "If you can't understand why this bothers me, then maybe you don't actually know me as well as you think you do." She didn't take that well. She huffed, said something about me being dramatic, and then hung up. At that point, I was done. I'd given them every opportunity to understand my side, and every time, they'd twisted it back on me. Grace was right. I didn't owe them anything. If they wanted a relationship, they'd have to make an effort, but I wasn't going to chase after people who didn't respect me. It was that simple. Over the next couple of weeks, I just focused on my own life. Grace and I spent more time together, and I started investing energy into things that actually made me happy. We planned a few weekend trips, focused on our goals, and tried to just enjoy life without all the family drama hanging over us. It was honestly refreshing to feel like I could breathe again. But it wasn't completely over. My parents didn't like being ignored, and they were determined to make sure I came to my senses. Out of nowhere, they started calling Grace, sending her messages asking her to talk some sense into Alex. They kept telling her how much it was tearing them up inside that I wasn't speaking to them and how they missed having a close family. Grace, being the amazing person she is, shut that down right away. She told them that if they wanted to talk to me, they needed to approach me directly and actually listen to what I'd been saying, instead of trying to make her the middleman. She wasn't going to let them guilt her into fixing a situation they'd created. I couldn't have been prouder of her. After that, the call stopped. I think they finally realized that I wasn't going to budge and that Grace wasn't going to play their game either. It was quiet for a while, and I actually felt some peace for the first time in months. I knew they weren't happy with me, but honestly I didn't care anymore. I was done bending over backward to keep a family bond that only seemed to matter when it was convenient for them. Looking back, it's crazy how long I put up with all of this, just because they're family. I'd been taught my whole life that family was everything, that no matter what, you stick together. But now, I was seeing things differently. Family might be important, sure, but it doesn't mean sacrificing your own happiness to keep the peace. It doesn't mean letting people walk all over you just because they're related to you. For the first time, I felt like I was actually standing up for myself, and it felt good. It wasn't easy, and there were definitely moments where I felt guilty, like I was doing something wrong. But Grace kept reminding me that this was about protecting my own well-being, not about making them happy. Now, as I sit here, I'm realizing just how much weight I've been carrying from this family mess. It feels lighter now, like a huge burden has been lifted. I don't know if my parents will ever really get it, but that's not my problem anymore. I've said my piece, and if they choose to ignore it, then that's on them. For now, I'm just focusing on the life I'm building with Grace. I thought things were finally settling down, but it turns out my family had other ideas. After weeks of silence, when I figured they'd finally backed off, I got hit with something I didn't see coming. I got a notice from my bank. My parents had somehow accessed an old joint account we'd used for some family expenses back when I was in college. I'd totally forgotten the account even existed, and apparently, so had the bank. The joint account was linked to my primary account, which meant they had easy access to a chunk of my savings. And of course, they'd helped themselves. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd said, everything I'd laid out for them, they thought they could just dig into my account like it was their own. It was so unreal it almost felt like a bad joke. I spent a solid 10 minutes just staring at my account, trying to make sense of it. There was no mistake. It was a direct withdrawal. I didn't even know what they'd use the money for, but I had a sick feeling it wasn't anything essential. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it was hard, knowing their track record. Grace walked in as I was sitting there, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. I explained it to her, and she just shook her head. "You need to take this seriously, Alex," she said. "They're not respecting any boundaries. They're just doing whatever they want because they think they can." She was right, of course. I'd been letting them get away with things for way too long, always brushing it off or trying to keep the peace. But there was no peace here, just more manipulation. They'd clearly crossed a line, and I knew I had to finally put a stop to it. The next day, I called my bank, and they helped me take back control of my accounts, closing the joint one entirely. The woman on the phone was sympathetic, even threw in a little, "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this" at the end of our call, which honestly made me feel seen. Once my finances were secure, I took it a step further. I reached out to a lawyer to see what I could do. I didn't want to involve the law with my own family, but I couldn't ignore this anymore. I needed some way to protect myself. The lawyer, who was about my age and didn't give me any judgy vibes, laid it all out. She told me that technically what they did could be considered theft. I almost laughed at how ridiculous it sounded. Theft and my parents in the same sentence. But it was the reality. She suggested that I could file a claim to recover the money and even issue a formal warning to prevent them from doing anything like this again. The lawyer's calm professionalism helped ground me. It was all business to her, no drama, and for once, it felt like I had a solid plan. I decided to go through with it. I filed a claim to get my money back, and I had my lawyer draft a letter warning my parents to stay out of my finances. I didn't want this to escalate, but I also couldn't let them keep walking all over me. Grace supported my decision completely, and honestly, that made a huge difference. Having her in my corner kept me from backing down, kept me from letting that lingering guilt push me into just letting it go. About a week later, I got the money back from the bank, but it was far from over. My parents didn't take kindly to getting a legal letter from their ungrateful son, as they put it. My mom called, practically yelling into the phone, accusing me of betraying the family. She kept throwing around phrases like, "We're your parents, we raised you, and this is how you repay us." I stayed calm. I told her, "This isn't about repayment. This is about boundaries. You crossed a line, and I have to protect myself." She wouldn't hear it. She went on and on about how I was tearing the family apart and how all they wanted was to help me and my brother stay close. But I'd had enough. I told her, "If you really cared about our family, you'd listen to what I'm saying instead of trying to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. You and Dad have never respected my independence, and I'm done letting it slide." I could tell she wasn't expecting me to stand my ground like that. There was this pause, and then she said, "Fine, if that's how you feel, maybe it's better if we don't talk for a while." And just like that, she hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It's tough to describe. I was sad because deep down, I'd always wanted my parents to understand me, to see me as an adult who deserved their respect. But at the same time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't backing down, wasn't compromising my own happiness for theirs. After that call, I decided to take some time away from them entirely. I didn't block their numbers or anything. I wasn't going for a dramatic cutoff. But I stopped reaching out, stopped answering their guilt-laden messages. For the first time, I felt free to focus on my own life, without their influence hanging over me. In the weeks that followed, I felt more at peace than I had in years. I poured my energy into my work, spent quality time with Grace, and focused on the things that genuinely made me happy. I even took up a few hobbies I'd been meaning to try, like cooking, which I'm admittedly terrible at, but hey, I'm learning. There were moments where I missed them, though. It's not easy to let go of family, no matter how much hurt they've caused. But every time I thought about reaching out, I reminded myself of all the times they'd ignored my feelings, crossed my boundaries, and tried to guilt-trip me into submission. I wasn't going back to that. I'd finally set a line they couldn't cross, and I was sticking to it. Grace has been my rock through all of this. She tells me she's proud of me for standing up for myself, and honestly, that means more than she probably knows. We're even talking about starting a family of our own soon, and it feels good knowing that I can break this cycle. My kids won't have to deal with the same kind of emotional manipulation I went through. As for my parents, I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day they'll come around, maybe not. But for now, I'm okay with the distance. I'm okay with living my life on my terms, without constantly worrying about their judgment or approval. This whole experience taught me that family isn't just about who you're related to, it's about who genuinely respects you, who's willing to support you even when it's uncomfortable for them. Grace has shown me more love and support than my parents ever have, and that's the kind of family I want to build with her. Looking back, I realized I was holding on to the idea of what I wanted my parents to be, rather than accepting who they actually were. Letting go of that ideal was painful, but it was necessary. And now I feel more confident than ever. I'm finally living my life for me, not for anyone else's expectations. Thanks to everyone who's followed this journey and shared their advice along the way. Your support has meant more than I can put into words. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely hopeful.